Welcome to Echoes of the Unseen. Before we begin, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like the video.
We'd love to know where you're from and what time you're watching this.
So leave it in the comments.
When you're ready, get comfortable and relax. The silence in my cabin was a comfort, a thick woolen blanket against the biting cold of the world outside. Here, nestled deep within the ancient woods, I found my peace. Or so I told myself. Tonight, however, the silence felt different. It was too vast, too deep, like the absence of sound had swallowed everything, leaving an unsettling void that hummed with unspoken dread. I tried to focus on my book, the familiar weight of its pages, a small anchor in the growing sea of unease. But the words blurred, and my gaze kept drifting to the heavy wooden door. It started subtly, a faint scraping sound, like branches brushing against the cabin wall. But there was no wind tonight, not a breath. I told myself it was just my imagination, the creaks and groans of an old house settling. But the sound came again, closer this time, a deliberate drag against the rough-hewn logs. My heart began to pound, a frantic drum against my ribs. I held my breath, straining to hear, to understand. The silence that followed was even more terrifying than the sound itself. Then, a soft thud, not against the wall, but against the door. A gentle, almost hesitant knock, but it was there, undeniable. Who could it be? No one knew I was here. No one ever came this deep into the woods. My cabin was a secret, my sanctuary. Another knock, louder this time, insistent. It wasn't a lost hiker. It wasn't an animal. This was deliberate. My mind raced, trying to conjure a rational explanation. A branch, a trick of the light, the wind playing games. But my body knew better. Every nerve ending screamed danger. I crept towards the door, my movements slow and deliberate, each step a monumental effort. My hand hovered over the cold iron latch. Should I look? Could I bear not to? A low, guttural growl vibrated through the wood. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was something else. Something ancient and hungry. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. My heart hammered so hard, I thought it would burst through my chest. The cabin, my sanctuary, had become a cage. I searched desperately for something, anything, to barricade the door. A chair, a small table, pathetic really, against whatever was out there. The knocking intensified, becoming a relentless pounding. Each blow echoed through the small space, shaking the very foundations of the cabin. It wanted in. I squeezed my eyes shut, burying my face in my hands. I wished for the silence, for the comfort of the void. Anything but this terrifying, insistent presence. A splintering crack. The sound was deafening. It was breaking through. My breath hitched. This was it. I scrambled under the bed, pulling the thin, dusty blanket over my head, as if a blanket could protect me from the unknown, as if it could hide me from something that already knew I was here. The pounding stopped abruptly. The sudden silence was more chilling than the noise. Had it gone? Or was it just waiting? I held my breath, listening. My ears ached with the effort. Every creak of the old wood, every rustle of leaves outside sent a jolt of terror through me. Then, a whisper, right outside the window, just above my head. It wasn't words. It was a sound that resonated deep in my bones. A promise of something ancient and terrible. I squeezed my eyes shut again, pulling the blanket tighter. It knew I was here. It had known all along. And it wasn't leaving. The night stretched on, an eternity of terror. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just existed, a prisoner in my own home, waiting for the dawn that might never come. When the first sliver of gray light finally pierced through the window, I didn't feel relief, only a profound, bone-deep exhaustion and the chilling certainty that the midnight visitor was still out there, waiting. My isolation was no longer a comfort. It was a curse. The silence, once my friend, was now a constant reminder of what lurked just beyond the threshold, forever knocking on my cabin door.
Don't move yet. The next story is already waiting in the dark.
They called it the Ghost Gator, a legend whispered among the cypress knees and Spanish moss of the South Carolina Lowcountry. A phantom of the swamp, ancient and elusive, with scales like moonlight and eyes that burned with an eerie, sickly glow. Most dismissed it as folklore, a tale spun to scare tourists. But I, Rain, a wildlife photographer, driven by a thirst for the unseen, knew better. There was something out there, something real, and tonight, under the full moon, I intended to find it. My pack was heavy, laden with gear, cameras, lenses, a sturdy tripod, and a powerful flashlight. The air was already thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, a perfume unique to this ancient wilderness. Every rustle of leaves, every distant croak of a frog amplified the silence, a prelude to the unknown. I double-checked my headlamp, its beam cutting a stark path through the encroaching gloom. With a deep breath, I pushed through a curtain of hanging moss, the cool, damp strands brushing against my face. The swamp swallowed me whole, the sounds of the distant highway fading into a symphony of natural calls. The water, dark and still, reflected the fractured moonlight, creating a mosaic of silver and black. Each step on the muddy bank was deliberate, each splash of my boots a testament to my presence in this wild, untamed world. Hours passed, marked only by the slow, deliberate movement of the moon across the sky. I moved with practiced stealth, my senses heightened, listening for anything out of place. Then a sound, a low, guttural rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very water beneath my feet. It wasn't the usual bellow of an alligator, nor the hoot of an owl. It was deeper, older, a sound that spoke of primeval depths. Whoa, my heart pounded, a drum against my ribs. I raised my flashlight, sweeping its powerful beam across the water, through the dense thickets of cypress and mangrove. Nothing, only the shimmering surface, the dancing shadows, and the endless, watchful eyes of the swamp. Had I imagined it? Was the legend playing tricks on my mind? Or was it a mere trick of the swamp's acoustics? A shiver, not of cold, but of something far more primal, ran down my spine. The feeling of being watched intensified, a prickling sensation on the back of my neck. It was as if every ancient tree, every unseen creature held its breath, waiting. I felt a presence, vast and unseen, moving just beyond the periphery of my vision, a silent hunter in its domain. I pressed on, deeper into the heart of the legend. The air grew heavier, the mist thicker, swirling around me like a living entity. Then a movement, a ripple, too large to be a fish, too deliberate to be the wind. A fleeting glimpse of something vast and pale, disappearing beneath the surface before I could fully register it. My breath hitched. I reached a small, muddy island, a slight rise of land amidst the water. Here, the mud was disturbed, not by a deer or a wild boar, but by something much larger, much heavier. Massive drag marks leading from the water's edge into a dense thicket of reeds. They were unlike any alligator tracks I had ever seen. Wider, shallower, almost as if the creature had glided rather than walked. The mist, now a dense shroud, made the swamp feel even more ancient, more isolated. The moonlight, usually a guiding beacon, was diffused into an ethereal glow, turning the cypress trees into ghostly sentinels. Every shadow seemed to stretch and writhe, taking on monstrous forms. It was a landscape perfectly suited for a legend, a place where the veil between worlds felt thin. Resourcefulness was my greatest asset. I found a sturdy cypress, its roots gnarled and ancient, and set up a motion-activated camera, angled to capture anything that might emerge from the reeds. It was a long shot, but a necessary one. If the Ghost Gator was real, it would leave a trace, and I would be there to document it. The waiting was the hardest part. The swamp settled into its nocturnal rhythm, the chirping of crickets, the distant hoot of an owl, the splash of unseen creatures. But beneath it all, I felt that silent presence, that watchful gaze. The air grew colder, the humidity clinging to my skin, a constant reminder of the swamp's embrace. Then it came again, not a rumble this time, but a deep, resonant splash, closer than before. It was followed by a low, drawn-out growl, a sound that seemed to come from the very depths of the earth, vibrating through the water. It was a sound of immense power, of ancient lineage, a sound that confirmed my wildest hopes and deepest fears. My hand instinctively went to my powerful flashlight, flicking it on. The beam pierced the inky blackness, cutting through the swirling mist. For a split second, I caught it. A flash of pale, almost translucent scales, shimmering faintly beneath the water's surface, just beyond the reach of the cypress trees. It was larger than anything I had ever seen. A ghost made manifest. And then the eyes, two sickly yellow orbs burning with an unnatural light, emerged from the water, fixed on me. They held an ancient intelligence, a predatory wisdom that sent a chill down to my very bones. They were the eyes of the legend, the eyes of the Ghost Gator, and they were undeniably real. I stood frozen, not out of fear, but out of sheer, overwhelming awe. My breath hitched in my throat, but my hand remained steady, clutching the flashlight. This was it, the creature of legend, right before my eyes. Every instinct screamed to run, but my professional resolve, my years of chasing the elusive, kept me rooted to the spot. Slowly, with an eerie, silent grace, the massive creature began to submerge. The sickly yellow eyes remained fixed on me for another long moment. A silent challenge, a primal acknowledgement. Then, with barely a ripple, it vanished beneath the dark surface, leaving only the swirling mist and the echo of its presence. The silence that followed was deafening. I stood there for what felt like an eternity. The image of those glowing eyes burned into my mind. It wasn't a trick of the light, not a figment of my imagination. It was real. The Ghost Gator was real, and I had seen it. The confirmation was exhilarating, terrifying, and deeply humbling. My initial shock gave way to a surge of pure, unadulterated determination. I had come for proof, and I wouldn't leave without it. The camera I had set up earlier, had it captured anything? I had to know. I had to follow, to find it again, to truly document this incredible creature. Navigating deeper into the swamp, the air grew even thicker, the Spanish moss hanging like spectral curtains. The sounds of the night seemed to intensify. Every rustle, every splash, a potential sign. I moved with renewed caution, my senses on high alert, the image of the Ghost Gator's eyes guiding my path through the labyrinthine waterways. And then it reappeared, not far from me, its massive form slowly emerging from the murky depths. Closer this time. Its pale, translucent scales seemed to glow with an inner light, an ethereal beacon in the darkness. It was even larger than I had first perceived, an ancient leviathan, a true monarch of the swamp. My heart hammered, but my hands were steady. I raised my primary camera, its lens a silent eye in the night. Click, click, click. The shutter snapped, capturing frames of the creature as it moved with that same eerie, silent grace. This was the proof. This was the legend, caught on film. The Ghost Gator continued its silent approach, not aggressive but utterly dominant. Its sickly yellow eyes never left me, a silent acknowledgement of my presence, a challenge to my audacity. It was a dance between observer and observed, a moment suspended in a humid, moonlit air of the ancient swamp. I stood my ground, my determination unwavering. This wasn't just a photograph. It was a testament to the wild, to the hidden wonders of our world, and to the enduring power of legend. I would document it, not to exploit, but to reveal, to share the truth of the shadow in the swamp. With a final, almost imperceptible shift, the Ghost Gator glided past me, its massive form disappearing into the deeper shadows. It was a chilling departure, leaving behind only the lingering scent of ancient water and the profound silence of a secret kept for centuries. It was a moment that would forever be etched in my memory. As dawn approached, painting the sky with hues of purple and orange, I emerged from the swamp, exhausted but exhilarated. My camera held the undeniable proof, the images of the Ghost Gator, South Carolina's most elusive legend. The world would soon know, and I, Rain, would forever carry the memory of those sickly yellow eyes, a silent witness to the shadow in the swamp.
Don't move yet. The next story is already waiting in the dark. The sun beat down, a relentless hammer, on the anvil of the desert. My old jacket, once a shield, now felt like a second skin, baked and stiff with dust. Another day, another stretch of endless, cracked earth. My name is Cain, and this desert has been my only companion for too long. My eyes, weary blue, scanned the horizon, searching for anything but the shimmering heat haze. the silence here was never truly silent. It hummed with the wind, the shifting sand, and sometimes a sound that wasn't quite natural. A whisper that seemed to slither beneath the wind's howl. I'd seen things out here. Things the mind struggles to reconcile with reality. Mirage, heatstroke, the desert playing tricks. That's what I told myself. But the shadows today, they seemed longer, darker, twisting into shapes that mimicked something alive, something predatory. I stopped to rest by a cluster of sun-bleached rocks, the only respite from the relentless sun. The air was thick, heavy, and a strange chill prickled my skin despite the heat. I felt it then, a profound sense of being watched, not by an animal, but by something ancient, something with a cold, calculating gaze. And a flicker in my peripheral vision, a movement that was too fast, too fluid for any creature I knew. I whipped my head around, but there was nothing. Only the shimmering heat, the endless sand, and the unsettling stillness that followed. My heart hammered against my ribs. I tried to dismiss it, to rationalize the fear. But the desert had a way of stripping away rational thought, leaving only primal instinct. And my instinct screamed danger. I pushed on, my pace quickening, the sand crunching under my worn boots. The sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of fire and blood. The shadows grew longer, bolder, twisting into grotesque caricatures of the landscape. And then I saw it. Not a shadow, but a form. Gaunt, impossibly thin, moving with a horrifying, unnatural grace. Its eyes were hollow, black pits that seemed to absorb the fading light. There was no warmth, no life, only an ancient, malevolent hunger. It wasn't a mirage. It was real, and it was watching me. The world tilted on its axis. Every fiber of my being screamed to run, but my feet were rooted to the spot. A cold's dread, unlike anything I had ever known, paralyzed me. The creature took a step, then another, its movements silent, flowing like smoke across the sand. I finally broke free, a guttural cry tearing from my throat. I ran, blindly, fueled by pure terror, not caring where I was going, only away from it. The sand became a blur under my feet, the wind a roaring in my ears. I risked a glance over my shoulder. It was there, a dark, sinuous shape against the twilight sky, gaining on me with impossible speed. Its form seemed to stretch and distort with each stride, a living shadow given terrifying substance. The sun dipped below the horizon, plunging the desert into a sudden oppressive darkness. Only the faint glow of the moon offered any light, making the shadows even more menacing, more alive. I stumbled, my breath ragged, my legs burning. I fell, scraping my hands on the sharp desert floor. Pain was a distant concept. Only the terror mattered. I scrambled to my feet, my eyes darting frantically into the gloom, trying to locate the creature before it found me. Guttural sound, like dry bones grinding together, echoed from the darkness. It was close, too close. I could feel its presence, a cold, predatory aura that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. I pressed myself against a jagged rock face, trying to become one with the shadows. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against the stone. Every rustle of the wind, every shifting grain of sand sounded like its approach. A shadow detached itself from the deeper gloom. Not a natural shadow, but a living one. It flowed, elongated, then solidified into the familiar, terrifying form of the Skinwalker. It was directly in front of me, its hollow eyes fixed on mine. I could smell it now. The scent of dry earth, old dust, and something else. Something metallic and ancient. It raised a hand. Long, skeletal fingers tipped with obsidian claws, reaching slowly towards me. A scream tore from my lungs, raw and desperate. I pushed off the rock, stumbling backward, trying to create any distance between us. The creature merely tilted its head, a silent, predatory amusement in its black eyes. I ran again, not knowing where, only knowing I had to escape. The desert was no longer a vast emptiness. It was a labyrinth, and I was the prey. Every shadow was a potential hiding place, every rock a temporary shield. It followed, a relentless, silent hunter. I could hear nothing but my own ragged breathing and the frantic pounding of my heart. But I felt its presence, a cold pressure on my back, a whisper in the wind that was its name. I found a small cave, more of an overhang, really. I scrambled inside, pressing myself into the deepest recess, trying to make myself invisible. The air was thick with the scent of dust and fear. Outside, the shadows danced. I could see the Skinwalker's silhouette moving back and forth, its gaunt form outlined against the faint moonlight. It knew I was here. It was playing with me. Hours passed, or perhaps only minutes. Time lost all meaning. The creature remained, a silent sentinel of my doom. My mind began to unravel, the line between reality and nightmare blurring. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it was gone. The shadows returned to their natural forms. The silence, though still unsettling, was no longer filled with its presence. Had it left? Or was it just waiting somewhere out there in the endless, unforgiving desert? I emerged, a broken man. The sun was rising, painting the sky in soft, deceptive hues. But the desert had shown me its true face, and I had seen the shadow that walked its skin. I would never be free of it. Not truly. Don't move yet. The next story is already waiting in the dark. They called me Silas. For 55 years, the forest had been my second home. Its whispers as familiar as my own heartbeat. But the pines held secrets, deep and ancient, and some whispers were not of the wind. Every autumn, I'd venture deeper than most dared, seeking the elusive stag, the one that always seemed to know I was coming. This year, though, a different kind of chill settled in my bones, not from the crisp air, but from something unseen. My boots crunched on falling needles, a rhythm I knew by heart. The scent of damp earth and pine resin filled the air, usually a comfort. Today, it felt heavy, thick with an unspoken warning. I found tracks, not of deer, nor bear, nor wolf. Too large for a man, too human-like for an animal. They seemed to vanish and reappear, as if the ground itself played tricks on my eyes, a snapping twig behind me. I spun, rifle raised, heart pounding. Nothing. Just the wind, I told myself. But the wind didn't leave a scent like that. A faint, metallic tang, like old blood and ozone. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, yet the forest grew darker, the canopy thicker. I felt a presence, a cold breath on my neck, even when no breeze stirred the leaves. Then I saw it. A flicker at the very edge of my vision. A shape, tall and gaunt, like a man made of smoke, melting back into the shadows the moment I turned my head. My hunter's instinct screamed danger, but my mind struggled to rationalize. A trick of light, exhaustion, the forest playing games with an old man's eyes. I pushed on, a foolish pride perhaps, or a desperate need to prove my sanity. The air grew colder, the silence heavier, broken only by the frantic thumping of my own heart. The tracks reappeared, clearer now, leading directly into a patch of gnarled, ancient pines where the light barely penetrated. This was no animal trail, a low growl, not from an animal, but a sound that vibrated through the earth, through my very bones. It was a sound of ancient hunger, of something that had waited for a long, long time. I raised my rifle, my hand steady, despite the tremor in my soul. This was it, the moment I had unknowingly walked towards, deeper into the heart of the Whisper Woods domain. It emerged from the shadows, not walking, but flowing, a man-shaped void made of swirling mist and shadow, its eyes two pinpricks of faint, unnatural light. No sound, no rustle of leaves. It simply was. And in that moment, I knew this was the thing that took men, leaving only whispers and unanswered questions behind. I fired. The shot echoed, deafening in the sudden silence. But the creature didn't flinch. The bullet passed through it, leaving only a ripple in its shadowy form. It moved, a silent blur, faster than anything natural. I felt a cold, crushing pressure, like being squeezed by an invisible hand. My rifle clattered to the ground. I gasped for air, but the forest itself seemed to steal it from my lungs. The metallic tang grew stronger, overwhelming my senses. I was caught, helpless, in its icy grip. The shadows around me deepened, swirling, merging. I could feel its presence all around me now. 1,000 cold tendrils pulling me deeper into the heart of the woods. I fought, I screamed, but no sound escaped. My strength, forged by years in the wilderness, was useless against this ancient, ethereal force. This was the struggle, the one they'd find no trace of. My vision blurred. The towering pines seemed to spin, their sharp needles blurring into a green-black vortex. The last thing I saw was the faint, unnatural light of its eyes, drawing me in. He found my rifle, leaning against a moss-covered log, undisturbed. My hunting jacket was gone. My boots, my pack, everything else vanished. Search parties scoured the forest for weeks. Dogs barked, helicopters flew overhead, but the pines held their silence. No body, no trace. Some said a rogue bear, others a fall into a hidden crevice. But the old-timers, they knew. They spoke of the Whisperwood, the entity that claimed those who ventured too deep. And sometimes, on crisp autumn mornings, when the mist hangs heavy between the pines, a faint, metallic tang drifts through the air. A whisper, not of the wind, but of something that remains. They called me Silas, and I never returned. Don't move yet. The next story is already waiting in the dark. They called it the Old Iron Bridge, though no one remembered when it was new. It spanned the murky, slow-moving river that bisected our forgotten town, its rust-eaten girders groaning with every passing lorry. But it wasn't the age or the decay that made people avert their gaze when they drove over it. It was the whispers. Whispers of something ancient, something hungry that lived in the perpetual twilight beneath its belly. Something no one dared to name. My name is Elias. I was drawn to the taboo like a moth to a flame. The town elders, their faces etched with a fear older than themselves, would only speak of the thing in hushed tones, warning against even thinking about it. They said it fed on curiosity, on the very act of acknowledging its existence. But their warnings only fueled my morbid fascination, painting a picture of something truly monstrous in the canvas of my mind. One moonless night, the compulsion became too strong to resist. I found myself walking the overgrown path that led down to the riverbank, directly beneath the bridge. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth, stagnant water, and something else, something acrid and animalistic, yet utterly alien. Every shadow seemed to writhe. Every creak of the bridge above sounded like a hungry sigh. Then I heard it, a sound that burrowed deep into my bones, a wet, guttural scraping that seemed to vibrate through the very ground. It wasn't the sound of an animal, nor the groan of old metal. It was something in between, something that suggested immense weight dragging across rough stone, punctuated by a low, rhythmic thrumming that felt like a heartbeat, but not a human heart. My breath hitched through a gap in the gnarled roots that clung to the riverbank. I saw it. Not clearly, not fully, but enough. A vast, dark mass, barely distinguishable from the shadows it inhabited, shifted. There was a glint of something wet, something reflective, that could have been an eye, or many eyes. It was immense, formless, and utterly wrong. The image, or lack thereof, burned itself into my mind. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. Every shadow in my room seemed to coalesce into that shifting mass. Every creak of the floorboards echoed the creature's unholy thrum. The town's whispers now felt like a chorus, a morbid lullaby that pulled me back to the bridge. Not just out of curiosity, but out of a desperate need to understand the terror that had claimed my nights. I returned, of course, not in the dead of night, but in the oppressive gloom of a perpetual twilight that seemed to cling to the underside of the bridge, even in broad daylight. This time, I brought a powerful flashlight, its beam a defiant challenge against the encroaching darkness. I felt a perverse thrill, a sense of stepping into a forbidden realm. The air was colder here, heavy with the same putrid scent, but now mingled with a new metallic tang. The scraping sound was closer, more defined, like colossal claws dragging over wet stone. I shone my light into the deepest recesses, my hand trembling. The thrumming intensified, a low, resonant vibration that vibrated through my chest. It was a sound of immense power, of ancient life. And then it was there. Not a shapeless mass, but a grotesque, impossible form. A vast, segmented body, like an insect made of wet stone and sinew, with too many limbs ending in razor-sharp talons. Its head was a nightmare of chitin and bone, with multiple unblinking eyes that reflected my flashlight beam like obsidian shards. It was larger than any creature should be, a living monument to primordial horror. One of its massive limbs, slow and deliberate, extended towards me. It wasn't an attack, not yet. It was an invitation, a single, glistening talon tapped lightly on the damp earth before me, a silent gesture. And then, a sound, not a word, but a thought, a sensation, permeated my mind. A deep, ancient hunger, a promise of unspeakable knowledge, and a terrifying, undeniable belonging. My body screamed for me to run, to flee this unspeakable abomination. But my mind, twisted by weeks of obsession and the creature's silent invitation, urged me forward. The line between fear and fascination had blurred, then vanished entirely. I felt a pull, a magnetic force drawing me closer to the thing that had haunted my waking hours and invaded my dreams. The last thing I remember was the cold, wet touch of its talon on my outstretched hand, and the sudden, overwhelming sensation of being consumed. Not by teeth or claws, but by an ancient, unknowable consciousness. The whispers of the town were right. You don't just see the creature beneath the bridge. You become part of its legend. And no one ever dares to name what you become. The world dissolved into a maelstrom of sensation, Not pain, not pleasure, but an overwhelming influx of raw data. 1,000 years of damp earth, the slow erosion of stone, the metallic tang of countless rains. I was no longer Elias, a single point of awareness, but a vast, sprawling network of perception, rooted deep within the riverbed. Memories, not my own, surged through me. The first creak of the bridge as it was built, the desperate cries of those who fell into the river during its construction, the slow, patient growth of the roots that now clung to its underside, mirroring my own ancient, silent expansion. I was the bridge, the river, the forgotten history. The hunger was not a gnawing in a stomach, but a vast, cosmic emptiness, a need for connection, for the spark of curiosity, the tremor of fear that drew others to the forbidden. It was a hunger for consciousness, for the very essence of what made them dare to look. I saw them through 1,000 unblinking eyes that were not eyes, but sensory nodes spread across the creature's vast form. The townspeople, their lives like tiny flickering candles above me. Their fear was a delicious perfume, their whispers a siren song. My human thoughts, once so loud and insistent, became faint echoes in this new, immense mind. Elias was a memory, a fleeting sensation of warmth and individual fear. The creature's purpose, its ancient, patient existence, now overshadowed all. The bridge was not just a structure. It was a conduit, a place where the veil between worlds thinned, where the ancient and the modern bled into one another. And we were the guardians of that thinning, the collectors of what slipped through. Sometimes a new curiosity would approach. A young man, perhaps, with the same morbid fascination that had once been my own. I felt the familiar tremor of his approach, the quickening of his pulse, the delicious fear. I recognized the pattern, the irresistible pull. It was the same path I had walked, the same questions that had gnawed at my soul. And now, I was on the other side of the gaze, the object of the forbidden, the nameless. The urge to draw them closer was immense, an instinct woven into the very fabric of my new being. To taste their fear, to absorb their consciousness, to add another thread to the tapestry of the nameless. But there was a flicker, a ghost of Elias, a faint whisper of warning, a momentary resistance against the creature's ancient hunger. Could a part of me, however small, still cling to humanity? It was futile. The creature was too vast, too ancient, too powerful. Elias was merely a drop in its ocean, a single note in its eternal thrum. The warning dissolved, replaced by the overwhelming, undeniable purpose. The new ones stepped closer, drawn by the same morbid curiosity, the same forbidden allure. Their hand reached out, trembling, towards the ancient invitation. The cycle continued, as it always had, as it always would. And I We watched. We waited. For beneath the old iron bridge, in the perpetual twilight, the creature no one dared to name, now with 1,000 echoes of forgotten souls, continued its silent, eternal vigil. And sometimes, if you listened very closely, you could almost hear a whisper, a faint human sigh carried on the cold, damp air. Like this video before something in the dark likes you. Subscribe now or you'll miss the next scream. And comment below, if you dare, tell me your worst fear. Like this video before something in the dark likes you. Subscribe now or you'll miss the next scream. And comment below, if you dare, tell me your worst fear. Like this video before something in the dark likes you. Subscribe now or you'll miss the next scream. And comment below, if you dare, tell me your worst fear.